4, 3. Hi there, everybody. My name is Christy Bain, and I have the pleasure of being an advisor with Reveal. Today, I'm here to talk to you about how MRP can help you apply the theory of constraints to drive efficiencies across your business and your supply chain. So in this session today, we're going to be covering off on the ways that MRP can help us to identify, manage, and control our constraints. And this is going to be through the practical application of exception management. Now, probably today you have some form of exception management going on in your business, whether that's happening as a result of the MRP run in conjunction with SAP, or if it's something that you're doing externally. We're going to talk about how to bring those activities in and have more effective exception management that helps us to resolve our constraint issues. And then the second thing we're going to talk through is the benefits of and sometimes the barriers to using MRP effectively throughout our organization. So there are reasons why MRP is not in play at every single company. There are some barriers that can sometimes make it difficult for us to get started on that journey, but it's a journey well worth pursuing. And then we're also going to discuss how organizations have successfully approached moving from our personal information systems to a single source of truth, and why that can really help us to align all of our operations and activities to work harmoniously with one another. Throughout the course of this presentation, we're also going to see some quotes directly out of the goal, because if we're talking about TOC, we might as well reference the folks who brought this to us. So Dr. Goldratt will be with us throughout our journey today. So here's what we'll cover. We're going to move through how MRP relates to the theory of constraints. And then we're going to dive into some of those common barriers and talk about how we can overcome them. Then we're going to go into the value that MRP can provide. And then we're going to discuss what good actually looks like and show you some examples of that. Then at the end, we'll wrap it up and we'll send you on your way with a couple of key takeaways that you can go back and apply to your business as it stands today. So starting right off the top, how does MRP relate to the theory of constraints? So we're going to go right back to the goal and have a little bit of a definition here. So TOC is a management paradigm, okay? So this helps us to build out a management system that allows us to identify constraints. And then we go through and we're able to focus on how we identify and restructure the rest of the organization around it. This is going to help us to debottleneck and make the process run more smoothly. For supply chain, what we're looking to do is we're looking to have an effective and efficient flow of both data and materials that helps us to drive decisions and move product from end to end and out the door to our customers. So there's a number of things here that we can borrow from and marry that with MRP. I thought it was really interesting. I was reading an article a few months ago, and one of the things that it was talking about is how having an ERP environment and using MRP in particular is actually a buster of a major constraint that we experience, right? We are working offline in paper. If we have our personal information systems in place, there's only so far we can go to get to the speed we need to be at in order to be agile and flexible in our ability to service our customers. So MRP effectively and efficiently working for us as an asset to our organization is an immediate addresser to TOC. So how does it connect? Well, if we look here, we have an integrated end-to-end supply chain diagram. And I'd like us to focus on three things here. We have a plan, which is the best of intentions based on everything that we know over a longer term horizon. We have a schedule, which is how we're going to action that plan. And then we have our actuals, which is our behavior in alignment to what we said we were going to do and what we committed to in our schedule. All throughout here, there are variables. First, we have this pesky thing in the form of our customers, right? The folks who are really driving the value through our organization and receiving the value that we're able to provide. They are feeding directly back into MRP as a form of demand and input. And then through this engine, we are going and relentlessly balancing supply and demand. That's the whole goal of material requirements planning, is to continually balance supply and demand. And that while we're doing that, to alert us to abnormal versus normal conditions in the form of exception management and monitoring. These customer orders are also feeding back into our sales and operations planning process. This is for our longer term planning so that we can incorporate that information in and make adjustments to our future looking plan. This allows us to refine our plan on a continuous basis, schedule accordingly, and then achieve the actuals that we're looking for. So what happens and what causes us to have breakdowns at any point along this integrated supply chain map? Well, a couple of things really. First of all, it assumes that we're flowing all of our information in through one system and environment, that the engine, in this case MRP, is well informed and able to give us reasonable and relevant outputs. If we're disconnected in any way, this starts to fall apart. In addition, this assumes that we have a steady and equal flow that goes all the way from end to end. In reality, we know that there are constraints that pop up, whether that's in the form of materials, or if it is in the form of processing time, or if it's in the form of physical capacity, availability, or equipment. So how do we resolve things that are really in the form of a process breakdown? Really, where does that integration breakdown start to occur and how can we identify it? When we think about a process and how we define it, it can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. You know, it can be the technical definition of going through a number of activities with a desired outcome and a preferred or expected sequence. It could be something like playing a game with your kids and going through and following Monopoly. It could be the process of baking a cake or cookies. So processes mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but when we're thinking about it, it's really just that series of actions or steps taken in order to achieve a particular end goal or outcome. So how does SAP help us to analyze process breakdowns? Is that really something that it can help us with? Because I imagine a lot of you feel like you're doing this largely outside of the system, right? You're getting tribal knowledge, you're getting some feedback, and you're getting information from physical observation of what's happening. Or maybe you kind of know that there are some problems, but you're not really sure where the breakdowns are occurring. What I wanted to highlight for you here is that every screenshot you're seeing on this page are tools that are available in SAP that can help us to be able to identify where those integrated process breakdowns are occurring, okay? So whether that is an evaluation of our rules versus our inventory performance through some of the graphs and charts that we're seeing, to identifying issues with imbalances that we might be seeing in the form of the red and green highlights, to things like capacity overloads, which we can see in the upper left-hand corner of our screen. All of these things are here and available as tools to help us as we go through and we evaluate the health of our processes and how we're integrated. And that process integration enables something very important, which is flow. When we think about how MRP supports identifying and managing and controlling constraints within the supply chain, one of the things that we can kind of refer back to is something called the ripple effect. So if we think about a top line bill of materials, we know that within that bill of materials, demand at the top level generates a supply proposal through MRP. Then we go through and we explode the bill of materials, which leads us to additional demand and then the appropriate supply proposals at the component level. So if you think about a BOM, one of the best ways to evaluate if you're having process breakdowns is to take it and flip it on its side and then think about the activities that occur at each level. You know, and you can work end to end all the way from customer order out the door, all the way back into your extended supply chain in terms of the materials that your supplier is providing and how they're performing with that lead time. So by looking at this ripple effect, we're now able to see what's happening. So the screenshots here, again, are directly out of SAP. So if you were in, for example, your stock requirements list on the upper left-hand corner of your screen, this is something that's available to you. It's hidden a bit. You have to know where to find it, but you're able to expand this out in an overview and see exactly what materials are potentially in a shortage situation or have an exception message that needs to be tended to. Further down, we can see the pegging report, which helps us to understand if there are connections between the top level and the semi-finished or raw components. We also can see our inventory performance. So in this red line chart here, you can see that we've had some volatility with this particular item. And we can see that there are a number of stockouts that are occurring. It's bottoming out, which we see with those little yellow circles. Because of this, we know that we're generating a constraint in our ability to produce this item because we are short on the raw material that needs to be provided, and that flows through for us. Here we have a couple of examples of the associated materials and how they're performing. So again, directly out of SAP through the tools that are natively provided to us, we're able to track and see the interdependency and the relationship of the inventory performance as we go out across an entire BOM. This helps to direct us to any places where we might be experiencing some form of constraint that's preventing us from being able to move product out the door. Okay. We can also then evaluate the rules that are involved. So for example, we've got in the lower left-hand corner a note of a PD MRP type that's planned to demand. So we're using a forecast. So that would allow us to go through and evaluate the quality of the forecast and then the associated impacts as we move across the BOM. So let's talk real quick about 3 examples where we can go through and identify constraints. And these are just 3 constraints that I've chosen today for the purpose of our talk. So the first is a demand constraint. So this is a situation where we are actually able to produce more than what the market will take under current conditions, including something like pricing, right? So maybe we have a particular segment of our products where we just do not have the ability to overdrive our sales. So is there an opportunity for us to look at how to relieve that? I'm going to show you some ways that we can identify that through the effective use of MRP and exception monitoring. The second one here is around an internal capacity constraint. Probably the most familiar and resonating for most of us that are working in a manufacturing space, right? We've got that one area of the manufacturing floor where things tend to get hung up, right? We've got to pile up that we're always trying to de-bottleneck and move through. And we've got a lot of manual intervention that is happening to allow us to do this. So this is the case, we are in a position where able to deliver is less than what the market demands under the current conditions. And then the last one here is when we get a little bit outside of what we control within our own 4 walls. This is when we have a constraint on the supplier side. So many of us are experiencing this right now in the COVID world, right, where we are finding that we've got shortages in entire commodity classes where the suppliers are not able to keep up, and we're still suffering from bullwhip effect in the supply chain, and it's ongoing. So in this case, we're not able to draw sufficient material from our suppliers within the needed lead time that the market is demanding under current conditions. And we say under current conditions on all these things because 90% of constraints are actually policy driven, okay? So those are things that are affecting us from a rules or a negotiation standpoint more than they are affecting us from a physical standpoint. So there's opportunity in those cases to evaluate and see what portions of our conditions we have the ability to change. So that could be cost. It could be the way that we are marketing and promoting information. It could be the way that we are buffering and addressing those constraints in a way that makes sense. It could be shared responsibility for managing those. So there's a ton of different techniques that we can employ in order to try to resolve these. But how does MRP help us to understand and identify these types of situations? So first, let's talk a little bit about the demand constraints. So this probably looks familiar to some of you. This is just the stock requirements list. And you can see here, all of those little blue highlights, those are exception messages. And in this case, these exception messages are happening because MRP is warning us that we are oversupplying and we should consider canceling replenishment. So in this case, it might be purchase orders and process orders, but it could fit any type of internal or external replenishment. Okay. In 20, we think of as cost avoidance, right? There's no plan to use this inbound stock. So what ends up often happening is that we just delay and delay and delay receiving these goods in hopes that the demand is going to right itself. But there might be some other activities or options that we could do. Maybe this is something that we are able to turn into an item that we are able to use. So we could renegotiate with the supplier, we could repack or repurpose. If not, then we have opportunities where we need to evaluate whether we need to actually see if we can go in and cancel this and avoid the liability. Okay, because the longer the inventory sits, even when it's a tough decision on what to do with it, the higher those costs go if we find that we still need to get rid of that or rationalize it out later. So right now, MRP is telling us we're continuing to build. So if we see the stock balance in the little red box that just appeared, that's showing us the inventory continues to increase and increase and increase over time. So if we look backwards, we can see that inventory has already been building. So this particular chart is showing us our stocking level. So we can see over time, if we look over the last several periods, we're already building. So we've probably been getting some of those cancellation messages and we've been having to take that stock. So now it's a mitigation effort to see what we can do to try not to be in a position where we continue to build that inventory or come up with a way to move it through the system. We can also see, because this happens to be both a purchased and a manufactured item, that the capacity utilization has been spotty. However, we continue to choose to build and build and build. And in this case, for the manufacturing portion of this, there might be an opportunity for us to go in and cancel that, since it is indeed within our control. The question would be then, going back to our example with the bill of materials, can we evaluate what the impact will be on any raw materials that are coming in, whether we have the opportunity to cancel any of that inbound good, and what the cost difference is in converting it and how we might best be able to use it for the customer. And then beyond that, how do we change our circumstance or scenario so that we have the opportunity to try to move this through? This is one of the ways that MRP and some of the other exception management tools in SAP can help us to understand where we have a potential constraint. Here we have an example where we actually have a capacity constraint. So you'll see the exception message type here is a 10. So that's a flip from the 20. In this case, it's telling us we need to get this inventory in here sooner. And it's because we are outpacing our current plan. So if you think about the plan, schedule, actual from earlier, we're outpacing the plan that we had put into the system. So it's asking us to reschedule in. And then it is also telling us that we are currently over capacity. So if we look here, here's some of our capacity monitoring and some of our scheduling tools. And in both cases, we're seeing that we are in the red with no opportunity to recover. So we would need to go through and see what we can do to rebalance that capacity, level it out, and then schedule it appropriately so that by the time this makes it to the manufacturing floor, it's actually something they can execute. And that's a big portion of getting the harmonized activities in place that allow us to achieve flow and reduce or debottleneck the constraints. So we can also see that we have a high level of deviation between our target and actual. So you can see here some gaps up at the top in the chart that has the black background, but also over here on the right-hand side, we have what we call the candy cane graph. That's the red and the white. And in here, we can see our target in the white and our actual in the red. And there's significant deviations in what we had scheduled and what has actually happened. So based on all the master data rules in the system, SAP thinks it's going to take X amount of time, but the reality is that it's taking much longer than that in some cases. So those wild deviations and the times when it is a little bit tighter and meeting probably means we're doing a lot of manual intervention to make that happen. So we're over capacity. We're needing to expedite, our schedule is stacked up, and we're seeing some significant process deviations. This would be a pretty good indicator that this might be something we want to go and take a look at. And this is all captured within the MRP exception message, giving us the cue, and then further evaluation using tools that are native to SAP to help us evaluate our capacity and scheduling, and then our performance versus target. So really helpful stuff here to go in and identify. And then lastly, let's talk a little bit about a supplier constraint, okay? So in this case, we've breached our safety stock level. So we're getting a exception message 96, okay? That's letting us know that we've dipped below what our stocking policy says that we should be at. We've got a request to bring some forward and push some out, which means that we're a little bit off of the demand plan, and we need a partial expedite and then a de-expedite to try to bring that back in line, which is usually indicative of one of two things. Either there's been significant volatility in the demand, or there's significant volatility in terms of the supplier's performance, and so we're cushioning the lead time, or the safety stock is changeable in a way that's allowing us to try to buffer and cover for that process breakdown that we're seeing. And then we can also see that we are in a position where we're likely to stock out or swinging negative, and we know that we potentially have a service level impact that's happening out across time if we don't take any action. So this is letting us know that there could be a potential problem. There's a couple of good indicators here that say, there might be something cooking. We might need to go and have a conversation, ask our partners what's going on, if there's anything we can do to help, and then evaluate how we can change our practices, our behaviors, and our rules alignment so that we're getting a more efficient breakdown of that plan. And if we look here, we can also see kind of what's happening with the inventory. So we can see that a little bit further out, we had some stock outs. Okay, when that happens, we probably went, ooh, we had some stock outs. What do we want to do to correct it? Well, while the supplier is working through the issues that they are faced with and attempt to be good partners, we may have done some things that would help us to recover that inventory, and we're actually bringing that average stocking level up. What we want to do is keep that average stocking level at an appropriate place that allows us to accommodate the volatility in demand, but also is not decreasing our turns at a rate that's unacceptable to the business, right? We want to make sure that we're balancing those two needs of having an appropriate level of inventory with being able to avoid those stockouts. And that's the magic of this whole thing, right? As supply chain professionals, that's what we're doing day in and day out. The devil's in the mix and trying to get those rules and alignments in place. And then we're able to go in here and just see a little bit more. We've got some range of coverage plans. So we can see that going forward in week 42, we had a significant problem when we're climbing back out. When we get up to week 45, we can see we're starting to build into a positive range. And then we're leveling out with a range of coverage that's between 5 and 10 days, which may be totally appropriate, or it may not be if this is an item that has some storage constraints. But this is another way for us to be able to kind of see where we're sitting and then evaluate what the impact is. So those types of considerations are able to come in play. And this is really just the tie back again, starting from an exception message that we are seeing in MRP today. We're able to then go and chase that through to the other pieces that will help us to identify and then hopefully resolve some of those constraints. Here's just a quick peek at what's going on with the supplier delivery performance. So we have a couple of different buckets here that help us to identify whether the shipments have been early, if they've been on time, and then if they've been late, and then at what thresholds they've been late. So we can see on average, we're running about 1 week late from the supplier. So I would again recommend we evaluate the lead time, but then we can also see down in the range of coverage that a range of coverage of about 5 days might be where we need to be when we're working on making that adjustment. And we can equate that directly back to cost dollars in form of inventory holding that we're doing and have those conversations on what we can do to help one another improve from end to end. So once we have proactive exception monitoring and management in place, this allows us to start going through the 5 focusing steps. Okay, the first thing is what we're seeing today, which is around identifying that constraint, and then through scheduling and evaluation with our partners, if it's external, we are able to go and evaluate how to best exploit the constraint to get the most value we can out of the areas where that are precious to us. And then we work on subordinating everything else to the constraint. So you're here having a TOC talk today. So I'm sure most of this portion of things and the principles is super familiar to you. But we know that those constraints really drive the pace at which we can go, right? That's the weakest link portion of the conversation, right? Is how how we can cure that and make it better allows for more efficient flow of everything else. We work on elevating the constraint, and then we try to prevent inertia from becoming the next constraint. But we know when we resolve one bottleneck or one constraint that we're experiencing, it is most likely that we are then going to see another that was previously hidden from us. So that's the continuous improvement cycle, and what's so great about being able to go in and proactively monitor the stuff in MRP and be able to make these improvements and ask the necessary questions to make those adjustments. So you find out where the problem lives, and knowing's half the battle, and then we work on how to best address it. So what are some of the common barriers that prevent us from being able to effectively use MRP? So here's some things that we commonly hear clients say, okay? See if any of this sounds familiar to you. It's trust, it's training and education, it's the system information is not correct, it's I'm getting an overwhelming amount of messages and it's just a pile of stuff that I don't know how to sort through and manage. So I end up doing my own thing in order to keep my desk flowing. So we show up at work every day wanting to do the very best job that we can, and we use whatever tools are at our disposal to make that happen. The problem is that the supply chain relies on transparency and visibility. So the advantage to being able to get things in the system and allowing SAP to do its job and MRP to run in a way that becomes a true asset to your team and to your business as a technology enabler that supports, people and process, that's really where the magic happens. So this is very common sentiment. And what I did here is I actually went and I pulled from feedback sessions over the last 5 months or so. So really since we've been in the situation that we're in right now with 2020. And even if I were to track back several years, a lot of the sentiment is the same. So these are the things that we want to overcome. So by investing in our folks and getting them the necessary information and investing in the process of improving the alignment of business rules and business behaviors, that's really how we start to get SAP to sing and use it to its full potential. And again, going back for just a moment, recognizing fully that there is only so far we can go if we are not able to use the technology to our advantage. We have to be able to link all the pieces in the supply chain together in order to be able to effectively make promises, both in terms of availability to manufacturing, as well as availability to our customers. So this is really important. So figuring out how to address these is the key. So, a lot of times, and I don't know about you, but especially lately, I've been feeling a lot like this poor person. So you're working so hard, right? Everybody has the best of intentions. We're showing up every day and we want to win, right? We want to do all the good things. But we find that a lot of times we actually feel quite alone. And sometimes for supply chain people, that's okay, right? A lot of us are analytical by nature. Many of us are introverts, but it's hard when you feel like you're working in your own world and you're not able to get the connection and the support to the rest of the functions, because we know that where the magic happens is through that common brain power, common human capital for problem solving and troubleshooting and reconciling issues. We oftentimes also feel like we're reacting rather than driving. How many times does it happen that you feel like things are just kind of dropping in on you? You get to the end of the month and you hit the forecast reset button and all your plans reset and you're chasing again. You're not sure if that's the right signal or the wrong signal or how you're going to react to it. Something gets thrown over the wall that's a priority that you weren't expecting. So a lot of times we feel like we're not in the driver's seat, and that's tough. And then oftentimes we are changing so fast, we are just entirely battered by the pace of change, right? It just keeps slowing through. And then the last thing, and this is really what we're talking about today, is we can't quite put our finger on where the bottleneck lies, right? Like we know that there's a problem, but where is it? So, we had a plan. It was a really good plan. We were all bought into the plan, but something's off because what we planned and what's actually happening are two very, very different things. And it keeps happening. So a lot of times when it's related to transparency, visibility, and technology enablement, what we find is part of the reason is that not everybody's working from that same plan, right? We've got all of these awesome Excel spreadsheets. I'm guilty. I love working in Excel. I just love working in SAP more. Then when we get super fancy and super proud, we add some access action in there because we've outpaced what Excel can do for us. And then we might even go a little further. We got the SQL coming in now, right? So we're doing some transformation of the plan that was the plan in order to get to a plan. And this poor gal over here against the wall is hanging out with what she thought was originally the plan. And then we've got, folks who are working from pieces of paper that are 2 days old, that are posted in the office that aren't the plan. And then as, a manager or leader, you're sitting there going, number, who's got the number, which plan is it that we're executing to? And then the worst thing is that then we go and we have the secret drawer plans that are contingency plans in case some plan did not go well. Yeah. This is what happens. And then what happens is that we aren't able to get the good intelligence that we need in order to be able to identify where our problems lie. Okay, so we know there's a problem, but where is it? So we know that high inventory covers a myriad of sins. So what we want to do is start to bring the inventory to a level that is reasonable, where we can start to see those rocks, and over time we're able to get that balance. Okay. And again, wherever we find, wherever we think we have final answers, the progress, the science, and the better understanding ceases. So if inventory is our answer and we're covering up our problems by buffering with inventory, maybe not the right inventory, this is an opportunity for us to be able to expose more of where our problems lie and continue to make that improvement. So what we want to do is we want to start to get some alignment between our people and the process, and then the smart enablement through good application of SAP. So first things first, we don't know what we don't know. So the system has all kinds of things that it's capable of, but maybe you don't have the full owner's manual to be able to go through and see where the opportunity lies, okay? So, and that also goes the flip, right? We don't know what we don't know from a process integration breakdown standpoint if we aren't able to effectively and efficiently use MRP. So one of the things we can do is we can start simply and review our results immediately, and then measure and adjust continuously as we go along. What we want to do is align the teams and integrate our process, and then empower that through the smart use of SAP and MRP in particular. And then cadence keeps us all sane. I like to say cadence keeps the crazy away, right? If we know what it is that we're supposed to be doing and when we're supposed to be doing it and what's happening upstream and downstream, a lot of times it's just knowing where our puzzle piece fits in for whatever it is that's in front of us. And then by making things more predictable, we're able to better analyze where we have those process integration breakdowns, which is going to expose where our constraints lie. So this is something called the value funnel. This is how we think about driving value in the business. And there's two things that are really critical to allowing SAP to perform well. We have to have a good reflection of our business behavior and our business rules. So our business behavior is the way that we and our extended supply chain, including customers and suppliers, actually behave. That's how we choose to conduct our business. The business rules are the interpretation of how we choose to conduct our business into rules in SAP in the form of things like master data parameters. The further the delta is between our business rules and our business behaviors, the harder it is for us to drive value. So by reducing that delta, really through doing some of the things that you see here through exception monitoring and process performance initiatives and analytical tools that create that sound feedback loop that tell us not only where we should focus, but if where we focus is giving us now the intended results, that's how we start to bring things together. So how do we get proactive? So this is your exception monitor, right? This is where we can tell if we are in a red, yellow, or green state, right? Red means that we're at risk of service level degradation. Green means we have potential excess inventory, and yellow means we're right on target and just kind of need to keep doing what we're doing. This helps alert us to which items or materials need attention. And this allows us to do that proactively. So rather than finding out because somebody told you there was a problem with the material and then going and pulling that material up, now we're using the exception monitor to actually drive where we should be going and looking for different abnormal conditions that need our love and attention. MRP and ATP, okay? So material requirements planning and available to promise are best buddies. If you don't have materials requirements planning working, it's really hard to get available to promise working the way we want it to. And we want to be able to do that because that allows us to promise both to manufacturing so that manufacturing can run efficiently, as well as to our customers so that we are making a promise and we're able to keep a promise. And what we're doing here is we're constantly looking for either errors or issues in our business rules, or we're looking for the delta between supply and demand, and that usually indicates that there's a difference between our business behavior and our business rules. Okay, there's really 4 things that we can see here. Incorrect rules, behavior doesn't match, the process is incorrect or broken, or we have bad data in the form of overdue elements. So, you know, all those housekeeping duties that we have to keep the system clean in order for it to run, because MRP is doing that net calculation of what is needed and when. So it's what, how many, and by when. If it doesn't have the correct inputs to do that calculation, then we get bad output. And that's the importance of those housekeeping elements. And that goes beyond MRP. That's to keep our system clean overall and have the right documents and the right accounting. So really important to keep those things in line. And here we have just a little bit more advice and noting around the strength of our overall chain. Our organization is really determined by that weakest link. So being able to identify and resolve that. So let's talk a little bit about what good looks like. So to me, good looks like flow. So if you're out on the manufacturing floor, you want to see a nice movement, right, throughout the manufacturing floor. It doesn't mean everything's busy all the time, right, because we're subordinating to the constraints. So there may be items that are, you know, able to go at a faster pace that are slowed because we're marching to that heartbeat. But it does mean that, you know, things are moving. You can tell when people are in a worried or harried state versus when things are going well. You can tell a good day from a bad day just through observation. So an integrated supply chain, right? Best thing about working in supply chain is it's integrated. Hardest thing about working in supply chain is it's integrated, right? So we've got a complex puzzle and system that we're working within. We rely on other folks to get things done. Hardest thing about working in SAP is it's integrated. Best thing about working in SAP is it's integrated. So we've got the transparency and the visibility that will allow us to have effective information flow. That effective information flow allows us to have effective material flow. It's all connected end to end from customer to supplier. And we've highlighted a few items in here in green that are really, really impacted by our ability to fully integrate throughout that end-to-end supply chain. Transparency in one number, harmonized activities, reasonable and realistic plans so that we're able to go out and do the things that we need to do. And what we're asking for is something that can be achieved. Okay, so here's just a quick little diagram where we can see the total flow from the end-to-end supply chain and all of the different pieces that can touch in here, from customer PO and the way that we account for the business rules around that, to procurement and production and the rules that we have there, to logistics and actually getting it out the door to the customer and looping back through the customer invoice. All of this is really, again, that alignment of plan, schedule, and actual, enabled and empowered through the effective management of our business rules and our business behaviors. So we were able to break those processes down and then identify the constraints. So we'll see this in the form of exceptions. So here we've got some process management exceptions. There are 8 exception message groups, and we can break those apart into understanding what's process management versus what's supply chain balance or supply chain realignment. Got some highlights for you here. This all ties back to our exception monitor, which is allowing us to see what kind of exception messages are out there, how many there are, and then what our current stocking state is, as well as our projected days of supply. When we see improvements, it looks like this. We see a reduction in the number of red lights, so lower risk of service level degradation. Our exceptions start to go down because we're proactively managing them. We have less in the category of overdue elements for both demand and supply because we're keeping our house clean and in order. And then number of materials, Depends on what's going on in your business, but that's something we would keep an eye on as well, just to make sure that our product lines are rationalized, everything is at the correct segment of the product life cycle, and the statuses are all kept up and appropriate. So here's where we can see improvements in terms of inventory, right? So we want to see things moving in the right direction. So in this case, we can see our average stock is up and our current stocking level is up, but everything else is moving in the right direction. So dead stock value is down, slow moving is down, and dead stock, by the way, doesn't mean that inventory is bad. It means that we haven't dipped into it and it is opportunity. Slow moving is the stuff that is really not moving, and we want to make sure that we're taking a good look at that. And then usage is consumption, and that's also moving in the right direction in this case. So you can see here, this is a picture of an item that has been worked on. So we want to be able to go through and break this out and understand what's going on with that inventory level. Again, the red line is the stocking position. So we can see receipts coming in, issues going out, or consumption, measuring our process deviation and trying to bring that back in line. And then we can see what's happening with our average and our current inventory to be able to identify future opportunities to stabilize. And this particular item could use some love and support because it doesn't look like it has a steady heartbeat yet, right? So that's an opportunity for us to be sure. Here we've got an item that is stocking out. So we went from volatile to an item that is stocking out on a continuous basis. If our planning strategy is make to stock, that's probably not good news for us. We want to make sure that we go in and address that. But when these things are resolved, when we work on these red line charts and we go in and we get our business rules and business behaviors into the system correctly, and we are proactively monitoring and measuring, then we start to see the examples in the tiles. So, the goal is to make money by increasing net profit while simultaneously increasing return on investment while simultaneously increasing cash flow. So when we do that, through getting our inventory levels at the right place and encouraging an improvement in inventory turns by lowering average inventory or improving our rate of consumption. So here's one for customer management. On time to the customer. So this person's really happy because they're able to make a promise and keep a promise. And by improving our ATP, we know that our cost to be able to sell is actually going to get better, right? Because it costs us a lot more to get a new customer than it does to retain a current relationship. So it's opportunity versus necessity, and we want to make sure that we're in a position to take care of those things. So when we're thinking about how we're getting to throughput, we really are talking about through sales, not production, right? If we produce it, but we can't sell it, then it's not throughput. So here we can see an improvement in on time and in full, and a reduction in late and early and over and under on our delivery. So really driving to OTIF, which is on time and in full. And here we have some things around our manufacturing. So improvements in terms of TOC orders, which are orders that we end up not using or not using completely, and orders without planned orders. So orders that we manually generated are coming down, which means we're able to use the proposals that are coming out of MRP rather than having to manually create them or having things that we're not using and we're canceling after. We're also seeing an improvement in terms of late. In this case, we've drifted a little into the early zone, but then a massive improvement in terms of on time. And this is directly out of some of our customer dashboards. And we can see here that we're reducing the deviation. The lines are getting closer between the green and yellow lines. And we've got some improvements in the way that the finite scheduling is looked. So we can see that we're flowing out across time in a way that's better. And this is helping us to reduce those opportunities where we're seeing things stacked up on top of one another and need to go in and adjust and re-level load our capacity. So a couple of real life examples for you, and then I'll bring you home with just some wrap up. So first of all, a little project at Moen. So some challenges here, and I want to hone in on a couple of things. First of all, you're going to see midway down component constrained production schedule. So due to lack of raw material availability, we're finding we're not able to flow as we would like through the manufacturing flow. floor. In addition, there was constant outside the system practices to try to get those materials in, as well as to schedule the production orders. So right hand and left hand, not necessarily synchronized, or certainly not looking at the same information all the time. And then that's getting passed through to manufacturing, who's also doing the best they can. So how do we fix that? Through getting to a point where we are able to use the system. So cleaning up the old bad data that is out there, re-evaluating the results of the MRP planning run, proactively managing exceptions allows us to expose where the constraints are lying, get material out of the way, and then focus on the manufacturing floor. And there were even some things like rebuilding supermarkets to try to buffer appropriately, and re-evaluating those and getting them right size. So some pretty significant improvements, and you'll hear a lot about Moen if you attend any of our talks. They've had a great deal of continued improvement, and I actually got to go out and work with them in December, so it was a lot of fun to kind of touch base and see everybody again. But they've had great sustained success. You can see one of their plants went from 59 to 95% in terms of their schedule attainment, and then a 25% reduction in inventory as well. So really good stuff there. And then switching over to Southco. So our friends at Southco, we did a little proof of concept with them. And one of the things that they were struggling with was just visibility from end to end. So what we thought we were planning to do, what we were actually scheduling, and then what was actually happening on the manufacturing floor were very different things. And if you spoke with operations, what they were saying is that we have no visibility. Things are dropping in all the time, where what's being sent to us isn't realistic to what we are able to produce and achieve. So basically, we're just doing the best we can while trying to take all of this in and then meet the needs of whomever is reaching out to us on a continuous basis. So in this case, what we discovered through our time with them is that the constraint was really specific to being able to get visibility to the tool room. So just by being able to create a window where they were able to see 48 hours in advance what was coming their way, we were able to start to debottleneck some of those constraints and then get the finite scheduling in place to make an improvement. So they did some great work there, working together in a room as a small group to make this happen, and doing just kind of hands-on end-to-end improvements. So lots of great benefits and really just getting started on their journey. And I have such optimism and expectations for them going forward. This was really a complete rework of how we went from plan, schedule to actual, and being able to get that visibility and attainment and really getting all of the folks around the table in order to make this happen. So I'm going to wrap you up just here with a couple of key points. So first of all, where to find more information. So we do have a booth. So that is one place where you can come to find us for a reveal. And then we've got our website shared with you here. And at the very end of the presentation, there will also be an email address. And then just a couple of references specific to theory of constraints for you to take a look at out there. And certainly, if you haven't made your way through the theory of constraints books, as well as the thinking processes, awesome reads. And if it's new to you, don't be scared, because the way that this is presented is really in a way that is fantastic and consumable. So if you haven't had the chance to do that, I imagine most of you who are on this session today probably have, because that's what piqued your interest. But if not, definitely take the time to pull that out. I actually read these probably once every 2 years or so. All right, bringing it home. So what can we do? We want to be able to cultivate a steady and structured cadence of activities, right? That's what keeps us all on the same page. And that adds inherent stability and predictability to the process. So if we know when activities are expected to happen, we understand where we fit into that model, we're then able to become more proactive and less reactive in the management. MRP is always talking to us. It's giving us intelligence we need in order to be able to identify, manage, and control and take actions to reduce bottlenecks and constraints. We just need to make sure it's got the right information to give us the best advice, right? Think about talking to a friend and only giving them half the story. Creating transparency and visibility are the keys here, right? Getting everybody on the same page so that we can have a harmonized approach to the activities that need to happen. All of this enabled through the smart use of SAP. And then by aligning our business rules and our business behavior, so being really honest about how we conduct our business and the way that we behave, the way our suppliers behave, and the way that our customers behave, and interpreting that into good intelligence in the system to empower the MRP engine, this is how we get smarter and better and have more value added information coming out that's really reasonable and realistic and actionable, which is really what we're looking for, instead of that big pile of stuff you're trying to sort through and figure out what's going on. And then the last thing is really just be brave. Make adjustments, do it smartly and as a cross-functional team. Make sure people are well-informed and communicated to, but try to make some adjustments. Immediately review the results. So if I change a planning parameter, I want to run MRP and I want to look at my planning. Do I like it? If I don't, I'm going to revert. I'm going to make another adjustment. So continue to do those kinds of things to help you see. Same thing with how you're managing your master data related to the manufacturing floor, or even your master data related to your customers and suppliers. And then just continue to monitor that and make more adjustments, and then look for the next bottleneck or the next constraint and address that as well. Okay, I've had a ton of fun chatting with you today. Thank you so much for your time and attention. This is a huge topic with a lot of information. So if you have any more, please feel free to reach out. We've got an email address here. You can find me at kbain@revealvalue.com. You can also find us on Twitter or on LinkedIn. So thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today. Have a wonderful rest of your day.